think after the three illustrious speakers who've spoken before me, I have a perhaps comparatively easier subject to deal with because this is a subject as vast as you can turn out to be, and depends how much we want to discuss it. But I'll stuck to certain basic aspects. Thereafter, we'll be open to certain question, answers, and discussion. I think that may be a much better way of going about it. Uh, so that's the way I think we will proceed with it. But one thing I want to say about the armed forces, because in each country today in the world, there's a discussion as to how much armed forces should you have, how much money can you spend, you have other needs. Like in our country, we have a similar requirement. We are a country which is progressive, which is trying on the road to progress. And we have much higher priorities. The biggest of them all is the poverty eradication. So how much money should you spend on defense? So issues of that kind are there, and it's a debate. Even a country like US, which spends almost $780 billion, that is exclusive of their nuclear expenditure. That's almost $1 trillion. Even they are not satisfied. They are wanting to expand. But there's a finite capacity of each country as to how much money can they spend. But one thing I like to say, as far as the profession, the two oldest professions of the world are concerned from the time the mankind came about. One was farming because you had to eat to survive, and second was soldiering, fighting, because that is the only way you could provide security to your own clan, your own tribe, and on your small villages, and then expand it to the townships and others. So this is an old profession, and much talked about, much discussed about it, much studied. There's nothing more written on any subject in the world than perhaps soldiering. If you go to any library, you'll find heaps and heaps of books on the various security developments which have taken place. But as far as India is concerned, also, I'll give you two quotes on the aspects of the national security. One, I'll go back to what we have old uh, documentary thing on the national policies and other things, what we call Panchtantra, that is from the growing out of the basic knowledge, where uh, writer has talked of that of all the gifts that a king can give, it is not the gift of gold, nor the gift of land, nor the gift of cows, which are also important. But the most critical critical and the important remains the gift of security. That is what is very, very important. Similarly, President Bill Clinton, when he took over, he talked of protecting our nation's security, our people, and territory. Uh, our way of life is my administration's foremost mission and constitutional duty. So have the Indian Prime Minister spoken, starting from the Prime Minister Pandit Nehru's time, then Morarji Desai came, and then Mr. Vajpayee's time. We had a very effective administration. Then came Dr. Manmohan Singh's 10 years, and now the present Prime Minister. One thing which has remained common in our country right through this period, two things as a matter of fact, I would say. One is our approach to foreign policy. By and large, it has remained on the same lines. There have been no major gigantic digressions from one to another. And second is our approach to the security, that the national security is important, but the amount of money which we can put into this, that has got to be related as per the requirement. That's why India is one of the lowest budget spending monies countries in the world. Now, in today's scenario, what constitutes really the security paradigm today's world, and how are the wars of today so different? One thing we have to remember, that today the situation is so dynamic and so strategically flexible and technologically developing that things really move at a very fast pace. And then one leader will come, uh, who has his own ideas, and he brings about a lot of change to the entire strategic paradigm. You take the example of the president of the United States. He has his own ideas on the role of NATO. He has his own ideas on what America's priorities are. America is one country which brought the rest of the world to globalization. But suddenly they have now come to America first. So it will happen from personalities to personalities and leaders to leaders. Nothing unusual. But it does make an impact. it does make an impact and does make a difference to the rest of the world, especially when a country as important in the US gets into a subject of this kind and has its own ideas. Now, as far as the future wars are concerned, the new dimensions, that's the problem. The soldiers are always chasing the last war. Where you fought a war, then you learn the lessons, you try to rectify those. In the meanwhile, the things have moved on, and you have again find that you are left behind. But as for the future wars are concerned today, well, people talk of that, use that word, which I certainly don't agree to. I don't think that would be a war. People talk of there will be no contact wars. So no contact wars in the terms of terrorism and insurgency is okay, but actual war will be no contact war. It beats my imagination. Maybe I'm too old or school of thought. But leaving that aside, there'll be cyber, space, precision guiding weapon systems, electromagnetic weapon system, missiles, information warfare. These 5, 6 things are the in things. The Chinese have spent last 20 years preparing for a war of informationalization. 20 years, and they are now somewhere nearing the end of it. Because these 6 factors will really rule, and they are the ones which will perhaps make your fighting less effective. Unless you are proficient in these things only. Only soldiering will not do all these. You've got to have prominence in all these things. One thing more I would like to mention, that you cannot prepare your armed forces overnight. It takes a lot of time because there is, firstly, you got to have a strategy of your own country that, of course, will be dictated by the national policy. Then you will think of your force structuring as per your security paradigm, security threats, and thereafter you will identify the equipment. Then you will have a doctrine to use that equipment. And most of all, you will also be looking to supplement your expenditure, to cut down on your expenditure, your manufacturing within the country, and also if you have to purchase, that itself is a time consuming thing. So anything, any new weapon system, if it is coming, any new system has to come in, any new doctrine is to come in, give it 15 to 20 years time, because it is the man on the ground who's got to be taught. It is not that 30, 40 people of like us sitting in this room and we try and be on the same grade. It is, fighting is like an orchestra. Everybody's got to do his own once you've told them. And there's nobody to guide it then. So it's a difficult process to get the same people on the same wavelength of thinking, same wavelength of reacting. There are human factors. So it is a long-term process. And now most of all, of having developed all these capabilities, one thing is that the joint races amongst the 3 services have got to come in. So it is 1+1 is not 2. You hope that this 1+1, when all the 3 services work together in the same sort of same slot of mind, same kind of a thinking exactly, and they've jointly worked out their plan. Perhaps it will be 1+1 will be 11. It will be an X factor. So these are very important, and this is how we have to think. Next thing. Now, preparedness for your country, your national security is not job of one government. I've always held this view. The governments will come and go. Governments come for 5 years. Some government, lucky they may stay on for 10. The earlier ones perhaps did even longer time, but nowadays things are so much in a flex always that the governments don't have too long a period. 10 years is a very good period for a government to be there, for a stable government to be there. But the process will go on because it will overlap over numbers of administrations and it will then continue. It's ongoing process. So it is a national defense policy, national defense security, national security are national responsibilities, and they are not the responsibility of a government A, B, or C. That is very important. And for that reason, I always personally felt that in the country, we must have a National Preparedness Council or something like that, where there can be a membership of of course, the CCS is there, that is Cabinet Committee of Security, is typical to us, where the Prime Minister and the Defense Minister, the Finance Minister, Foreign Minister, these are the members, and with the others in attendance like the NSS and the uh, NSA and the chiefs and others are there. So that is one. But besides that, well, now there are two routes you can follow. You can pick up the leadership from the country, from major parties. So you can say, okay, any party which has more than 10 seats in the parliament can be a member of that committee and have such 4 or 5 people. Or you can then pick up people like what one of the countries is doing in our neighborhood also. You can have a couple of chief ministers of who are of good repute and who have a good standing, and some other people of that kind of a standing in the country who make a national preparedness council, which gives you a continuous run. So if the one government goes, the next government comes, at least there's certain element, there's certain amount of continuity. And second advantage which that will provide you is that whenever you're doing something big, there is always an opposition in the country which must be there. If you don't have an opposition, actually you suffer from the lack of an opposition, and that is one of the worst things which can ever happen to a country. And these people make sure that the opposition does not then interfere with your job, because they are themselves from the opposition there as a part of your group. So I think that's how, when you are looking at the defense preparedness and your national security, you must have element which is goes outside the government also, who participates with the government and supports that effort. Of course, major policy decisions which have to be taken at point in time, they have to be the responsibility of the government. Now, the next question is, how much armed forces does a country need? Now, I'll talk about India. How much do we need? That will obviously, it goes without saying, that will be directly related to our national aims and aspirations. Now, India, as you all know, historically, India is not been a hegemonistic country. We have no for extraterritorial ambitions. We have always stuck within the confines of the natural India, which extended up to Afghanistan and went up to Myanmar, Sri Lanka, and all that. That's what India was all about. And we have never looked beyond that. So we have, even today, right now, maybe 20, 30 years hence that things will change. But right now, what our national aspirations are, that we are a regional power and we should stick and absorb that particular aim and pitch ourselves at that level. But as far as our security paradigm is concerned, unfortunately for us, we have two countries with us. One is Pakistan, which is somehow has never been able to fight their feet. As a matter of fact, their problem is, I think, and I always felt that it is more of an existential problem. They've not been able to reconcile to their existence, and they always feel threatened by India. India doesn't have any such designs. Frankly, India, like peace, we have more Muslim population than Pakistan has. As a matter of fact, the second highest after Indonesia in the world, and very close to the Indonesian. Then perhaps we would be even more than them. And second, we have China. With China and Pakistan somehow have been together. First, China on behest of Pakistan was helping them, and now China has its own requirement because they've got a CPC, the China-Pak economic corridor running through that, in which they spent a lot of money, invested over $65 billion and maybe more. So both these countries are in a nexus with each other. Unfortunately, India is been trying its very best to make sure that we have good relations both with Pakistan and with China. And but while that comes about, the fact is that we have these two issues, and coupled with that is also the Pak perpetrated insurgency, proxy war in the state of J&K, which has gone on ever since 47 and more so since 1990 onwards, when the problem really broke out in that particular area. Okay, so we have these two requirements, and thirdly, now ever since President Bush, Obama's time, even Clinton's time, and started with more with President Obama's time when we talked of the Indo-Pacific. That time Asia-Pacific, now the term Indo-Pacific is more prevalent, that we have a joint vision in this area. So starting from the coast of Africa, going right up to this thing, we have joint vision. And but it is not against any, it is not a militaristic coalition. I want to make that very, very clear. India is not a part of any coalition. India is a country which has maintained a strategic independence. We are not part of any coalition, and this is a joint vision for progress and trade and other things, and not pitted against, say, China or any other country. But India doesn't take it in that spirit. So these are our areas of responsibilities. Okay. One more theoretical issue which I would like to talk about. When you talk of a comprehensive national power and what are the constraints of a national, constituents of a national security, few things, it is not only defense, because I'm an army man, doesn't mean that it's only the uniform fraternity which has got to contribute. There are many other factors, and some of them we take a lot of pride in. One is the social fabric of the country, which is very important. That is internal cohesion and security. Very, very good. As a matter of fact, fortunately for me, from the VIF, we went on lots of visits to our friendly think tanks in different parts of the world, and everywhere we went, we were congratulated by people for a country of our size and with the kind of diversity which we have, as to how have we been able to maintain such a social cohesion. As a matter of fact, now those of you over here, you should not go get led astray by or protests here and there. That is part of a democratic world, and it must be there. Non-existence of protests will itself show that the country is kind of in a dictatorial mode. So, but social fabric is very important. Economic strength of a country is very important. Uh, Stable democratic governments are very important. Very good. We've had a couple of governments, like the last 25 years, you can count. Mr. Vajpayee had two tenures. Uh, over 6 years he did. Then Dr. Manmohan Singh, 10 years. Now the present government is headed for 10 years, maybe 5 years later, 10, 15. But that one, no. But we've had stable governments. And it is the strength of the Indian democracy that the day the election, now you would have heard about Delhi election, so much of noise and all that. But the day the election was over, next year there was a swearing in ceremony which was attended in all peace and things passed on. Similarly, when the present government came after the Congress government went, very smooth. There's nothing happens in this country which shows that there's a huge traumatic event has taken place and now there's a change. How will we adjust? It doesn't happen. That is the strength of our country. We do not encourage religious fundamentalism. That is very important. And that has been very well controlled in a country like this. And we promote caste and not promote, as a matter of fact, discourage caste and communal aspects. Uh, then we have today, because of poverty in some remote areas now left, very, very minuscule areas left, a certain amount of insurgency. But that is more poverty driven in tribal areas and all that, which is also now getting to be extinct. And the major source, major struggle for India or effort for India is to eradicate poverty. But out of all these issues which contribute towards the national security and which are part of the national comprehensive power, another thing, the defense, of course, stands out because it is the most visible thing. Now, having come to that, one thing I like to see now, see our area, the size. We are a subcontinent, huge. We have borders which are over 11,000 kilometers long, land borders. And you'll be surprised, our biggest land border is with Bangladesh, 4,096 kilometers. And then you have China, 3,488, Pakistan, 3,323, Nepal, then Myanmar, and then Bhutan. So total, all this All this put together will be 15,000. Between China, Bhutan, and Pakistan, 11,000 kilometers long. And we have a coastline of 7,500 kilometers long. As and you all know, Indian Ocean is a very, very important area because entire the energy of the world, three-fourths of the energy of the world passes through this area. India is a huge consumer. China is a huge consumer. As a matter of fact, I think another 20 years' time, India will become the biggest consumer of the energy in the world. And this is the energy route which passes through the Indian Ocean over which we sit. And for that reason, it is very important for us also and for the others also. So our security needs are huge. And we have to make sure that we have enough preparation to make sure that we are secure because we are not part of any alliance. We are on our own. That we can spend only as much. Thank you. Thanks a lot. As much money as we can manage to spend. Okay. Now the point is, if you have a border which is say 11,000 kilometers long, and you have to take care of that. You need land forces. You need navy. You need the coastal belt, which is 7,500 kilometers long, and also the airspace, which is humongous. You need money, but we spend very little defense budget. Our defense budget, ladies and gentlemen, is just 1.5% of the GDP. I think it must be amongst the very lowest in the world, 1.5% of the GDP. And that is hardly $65 billion in converting, because we are $3 trillion economy. When you convert it into the actual cost of the money, $65 billion. And out of that $65 billion, around uh, 20 billion go through to the pensions of the service people. That is also part of the defense budget. So when you were counting the defense budget, you just counted as a 45 billion. The pensions are of no good. And then out of the balance, what is left? Also, a good about 50-60% goes into the revenue, the maintenance, and all the revenue expenditure. You all understand the serviceability, the maintenance, the pay, salary. So what we got left with monetization is just around 16 odd billion dollars, which is not much. Today, if you buy a weapon system, it is it's very expensive. It's very expensive. So we don't have much of money because India has never, because of our non-hegemonistic designs and non-aggressive designs, we have never thought in terms of spending too much of money on defense. Our idea is to be able to protect our own territories and be happy with it. The rest is all our trade and good relations with the other countries and the world and all that. So that is what it is. But the strength of the armed forces today is around a million, 1.2 million, and that is also because of our very vast borders. Now, technology cannot really, if you go to China, I don't know how many of you have had the opportunity to go towards the northeast. If you move along the northern borders and the Chinese borders, you'll see areas which are hundreds of kilometers, which you'll hardly find few soldiers. But they are only there and they're patrolling and all that because the areas are very vast. But you need to defend them. You got to take, that is your territory, you need to take care of them. So these are our challenges. We've had certain weaknesses in our system on jointness and other things. There's been one recommendation which has been pending for very long. Chiefs of defense staff are joint, like the Americans have joint chiefs of staff and all that. We didn't have that. Now it has been brought in. The idea is to bring in more jointness, optimize your capabilities, and also reduce your expenditure so that the redundancies can be taken care of. So we are on that process today, and that's how we are. And we are hoping that we'll be able to maintain good relations. Now, President Trump is coming very shortly here, and I suppose there'll be discussions again. But as we said, we have right through maintained good relations with everybody. Our ideas are very clear. We need good friendship with the Americans. We need good friendship with the Chinese. We need good friendship with the Russians. We need good friendship with the European world. And of course, Africa and all that are our kins next door to us. We must have very good relations with them. So there's no part of the world which is not important for us. Because that is the way this country is constituted, that's the way this country's psyche is made. Have good relations with everybody. And don't get into sort of politicking of our politics goes on, but not get into groups and alignments to fight one against the other. So that's all I have to say. Now, if you have any